Welcome back, guys. Let's dive into lesson 2, You Were Made for Greatness. The title of this week's lesson comes from one of Pope Benedict's talks at a World Youth Day a number of years ago. He told the young people in attendance, "The world will offer you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness." But the reality is, you know what? So often we settle for comfort when God wants to give us greatness. Why is that? Last week, we talked about the second strength of our lower brain is it helps us to avoid pain, all right? One of the ways it does that is to try and get us comfort when we're in a painful situation. Let's look at an example. We all experienced something similar to this when we were young. We're out riding our bike, we fall off the bike, we skin our knee, we're crying because we're hurt. Our parents maybe come out to us and they're trying to make us feel better, but no matter what they do, we keep crying, we're still upset. And so they resort to bringing us a cookie. And you know what? All of a sudden we feel a lot better. And there's hormones and endorphins released in our brain for having that cookie. And what it does is it creates a neural pathway in our brain. And the next time we're feeling uncomfortable or we're hurt or something, our brain is going to say, "You remember when we had that cookie before? Remember how that made us feel better?" And every time we do that and we say, "You know what? Yeah, let's have a cookie. That'll make me feel better." It actually stimulates this reward center and reinforces the neural pathway in our brain. And what's doing that is a neurochemical called dopamine. Dopamine actually it's a neurotransmitter in our brain that just allows communication back and forth between the cells in our brain. Let's look at some of the things that can stimulate dopamine in our brain. All right. Here's our brain. We've talked about how, you know what, food can make us excited, make us feel better. And so in that process of looking forward to the food, dopamine stimulated, we forget about whatever negative is in our world and we feel a little bit better. Another thing that stimulates dopamine are video games. Video game designers are very good at making you excited to play and to work towards the next level. That's part of the design there is as we're working towards a goal, dopamine is released, okay? It's not actually it's not when we achieve what we want, it's the anticipation and the looking forward to what we want to experience that the dopamine is released. Very similar thing happens with social media, smartphones, in that the algorithms that the designers of social media create aren't to necessarily provide us what we want. They're designed to analyze what it is that keeps us engaged so that they can keep us on their platform and they can sell us to their advertisers so that they can make more money. One positive way that dopamine helps us is in working towards goals, okay? Dopamine helps us focus onto something so that we're working towards our goals. One of the things that has been found with young people that have ADHD is part of the reason they have a difficult time focusing is because they have lower levels of dopamine in their brain. And so they can't rely on the dopamine to get them to focus on what they want. And they have to learn other ways of being able to work towards their goals. So far what I've gone through is I've gone through a few ways that are relatively morally neutral. Okay, whether you have a cookie or not probably isn't going to have a huge moral implication on your life. But I want to look at a few things that now begin to get into an area that they're going to have may have some moral repercussions. Okay, obviously the main one we've been focusing so far is pornography. Okay, as we look at pornography through that process of searching, finding a picture or a video that we want, huge amounts of dopamine are being released. Okay, and that is stimulating in us and creating or reinforcing neural pathways. Okay, so the next time we feel bad, our brain is naturally going to want to go through and find something that's going to make us feel better. And depending on the circumstances, it may trigger that neural pathway to make us want to look at pornography. Another thing that can stimulate dopamine is alcohol. The excitement of going to a party and drinking alcohol. Again, if you're of age and you're not getting drunk and losing control, could be morally neutral, but it is something that, because of the nature of the dopamine that's released, it can become something that's somewhat addictive. Same thing, of course, goes for drugs. Okay, so as we look at the stimulation of dopamine, it's part of what happens in the lower brain that makes us desire something. Now let's look at how it helps us avoid pain. Okay, now I want to introduce you to a concept called buffering. What buffering is it's using a comforting behavior when we experience pain, boredom, or discomfort, even though that behavior will ultimately have a long-term negative effect. Okay, so let's look at an example. All right, this is you. You're experiencing pain, boredom, discomfort, and you don't like it. So what does your brain do? It says, hey, I'm going to find something that's going to be a dopamine trigger, and that's going to buffer, shield me from that negative emotion for a period of time. And as you can see in the little stick man in the picture, hey, problem solved. This is great. But the reality, and let's use the example of pornography, the reality is shortly after we indulge in looking at pornography and any other sexual sin that goes with it, is what comes isn't happiness and joy. What comes is guilt, shame, and a feeling of a distance from God. Okay? This is an example of what the negative emotions are and the negative effects of a buffering activity. So again, why do we do it? Well, on the left-hand side here, we see a scale of 0 to 10 for positive emotions, 0 to negative 10 for negative emotions. And what happens is our brain naturally says, as our emotion, the way we're feeling starts to go down, if we engage in a buffering activity, the release of the dopamine distracts us from that long enough that we begin to feel better momentarily. Okay, so what do? Here are some tips to learn to stop the buffering. The first is this. When you realize you're about to buffer, stop and engage your higher brain. Okay, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see that scale again, negative 10 up to positive 10. Just take a moment, stop and think what you're feeling. Is it positive? Is it negative? And learn to rate it on that schedule. It'll give you a sense of what's going on. What is triggering me to want to buffer? Similarly to that, go another level deeper and begin to look at what are the thoughts or the emotions that are bringing that rating down. Okay, become curious about it. Think, okay, what is it? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And if you have a tough time finding the emotion, avoid the buffer for a while. And the longer you avoid the buffer, the stronger that emotion is going to be to help you to identify it. It's kind of a unique thing that happens there. Once you have identified the thought or emotion that is making you feel bad, ask yourself, what are some things I can do to feel better that's not going to have a long-term negative effect? Okay, this is where one of the strategies to overcome the temptation to look at pornography for years has been, get outside, go for a walk, go for a run, do something physical, engage with someone socially, so that those are activities that can very naturally, again, bring up your level of dopamine and don't have negative moral consequences to them. And then finally, take peace in this. Jesus told us, I've told you these things so that you may have my peace. In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Okay? Jesus didn't promise us that just because we're followers of him, that everything's going to be perfect. We will continue to have good days. We'll continue to have bad days. We'll experience plus 10 moments emotionally. We'll experience minus 10 moments emotionally. We're going to experience it all. But through it all, Jesus can help us to experience peace. Okay? And so ask him, Lord, help me to find peace in this moment. And you know what? It might not happen right away, but God is great at answering those questions. Okay? Now, as we work on finding these emotions, it might be difficult. This is something guys aren't necessarily naturally good at in identifying their emotions. So in the appendix of the workbook, you're going to find an emotion wheel. And as you look at that, you're going to see 3 rings of emotions. The inner ring are primary emotions, okay? Anger, happiness, sadness. Those are going to be the most intense. And as I said, the primary emotions. The next ring out is going to be a secondary level, okay? A little bit deeper, probably a little less intense emotion as you look at it, but it begins to help you to put words to what you're feeling, okay? I'm not just angry, I'm bitter, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, okay? It helps you to get a little more precise, and as you get more precise in knowing what those emotions are, helps you to better be able to resolve those, accept those, or move on. And then finally, the outer circle is going to be the most specific level of emotions, but also, again, most likely to be the least intense. So those are some tools that can help you in this process of recognizing buffering. Why am I buffering? And then choosing to do something positive or not morally negative that's going to have a long-term negative effect in our lives. And you know what? This isn't going to apply just to this project of working to become free of pornography. This is going to apply to every aspect of life where you want to move from vice to growing in virtue. This is key, fundamental part of maturity. So engage the process, do your workbook, do the readings, do the videos, and we'll look forward to picking this up next week. Thanks.